Cam, my question though is, how video that? It's a very up close camera.
I'll jump in.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of kind of handwritten emails. There's just some blank slides that you have them.
Don't worry about those. I was working in the cloud yesterday, so I was just putting everything next to the
Like delete them.
You can delete them on yours. Yeah.
Great.
How are you?
Good. Is Marianne going to choose?
Nope, she's like, you are chairing. I just got a text from her assistant. She won't even be online.
Okay.
No.
Where do you want me to sit?
Hey, hello there.
Hey, Gary.
Wherever you'd like, I can move back here. This is kind of where the new audio is coming from. So whatever.
Well, yes, wherever you want, really. We've put the officers up here before, and I've got a hard copy and a notepad for you if you want. But you can go wherever. We have some waters up here, and Abby will be in any moment with some water.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, I guess I'll just got it in. Save it on.
There, maybe right after the-
Is my audio working?
It is, Mayor. We can hear you fine. How can you hear us?
I can hear you great. The last time the audio quit working and I still don't have any idea what happened, but evidently it fixed itself.
Meg, I may be a little echoey because of where I am positioned. Wayne, why don't you give us a little spiel to test the audio over there?
Board members, welcome to the Utah League of Cities and Towns board meeting. Can you hear us? Meg gives us a
I
thumb.
can hear you.
I can hear
Gary's giving us
you.
a thumbs up.
I can hear you. This is Mayor Harvey.
Excellent. We have a new setup that we are testing out for the first time today with some tracking cameras, a new mic system that you can actually see it from that shot. The glowing little panel up there has 12 directional mics that should be able to pick up us anywhere here in the room. So let us know any feedback after this meeting as far as how the tech is for you compared to previous meetings.
Who remembers previous meetings?
Yeah.
Is that music playing?
It is. That is music I had going as to set the tone for the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I thought I was going to create a artist playlist.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just wait and get a few in here.
That's right away from the one.
So how do you guys like being back in the office?
It's easier in many ways.
Are you all back?
Huh?
Is Mill Creek all back in the office?
Yeah, still hybrid. I mean, everybody can come back, but some people work better remotely, so
Yeah.
we are being flexible.
That's funny how that changed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily in a bad way. The technology
No,
is
I mean,
an advantage.
a lot of our people have the ability to do it remotely, and their vehicles are out elsewhere, so why not? They're being more efficient getting work done, so.
Yeah, that's great.
Cam, it's a little hard to count for a quorum since I don't know how many people you have there. So
We have 2 voting members here. And I'm counting it up as well
Okay.
for both, Roger.
Yeah, Roger, we are 2 away from a quorum.
Is that not working now?
Water.
Water there, and then there's lunch. We have Jimmy John sandwiches for everybody in person with water bottles. I just there should be one.
You like to put a mic there? So
That's right, yeah, all right.
So we're girls, we do something fun. So.
He's in Belize. Yeah. Yeah, last big family trip before his daughter goes off to college.
Okay.
And then Mary Ramsey was going to be calling in, but like I said, she texted me she's sick and not feeling well. So.
I'm saving up my Belize trip until winter. Not that I have one, but if
But
I
if you
go
were
there,
to have
I'm gonna go there when it's really cold and you guys are suffering. So.
Thanks for thinking of it. Mid-session.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. You can only dream, right?
Okay, we're good. Roger, we now have a quorum.
Yeah, I agree.
Why?
We have a quorum, Roger?
Yep.
Okay.
You now.
Well, welcome, everybody. This is Jeff Silvestrini. I'm actually the second vice president, but since Mayor Caldwell is playing hooky and Mayor Ramsey is not feeling well, I'm going to be chairing the meeting with your indulgence. So we have a quorum, the record should show that. And the first item on our agenda beyond that, do we want to do it? Introductions are difficult, I think, on Zoom.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
So we'll pass that. It's nice to be here at the legal offices, and I see that almost all the staff is here, so that's great. The first item on our agenda is a public hearing on our budget. And so I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second. This is Andy.
Okay, so you have a motion by Gary Crane, seconded by Andy Bierman. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the public hearing on the fiscal year 2022 budget is now open. Have we received any public comment electronically?
We have not, and the only attendee online is Jaden, our intern, and it doesn't look like we have any members of the public here.
Okay. Are there any members of the league board that would like to make any comment on the budget? Okay, seeing none, then I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Clint Smith.
I second that. Tawny McKay.
Thanks, Clint and Tawny. All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, public hearing is closed, and then I don't know if we adopt the budget now, or we.
No, we'll get back. We'll come back to the budget.
All right, okay. So then the next item on the agenda is number 3, which is entertain a motion or any comments with respect to the minutes from our last meeting of May 17.
Motion to approve by Andy Bierman.
Second, Carrie Malkovich.
Thank you, Andy and Carrie. All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Good, the written minutes are approved. Are there any, does anyone need to make a conflict of interest disclosure? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to item 4, which is, I think Abby Bullock is going to talk to us about some positions.
Okay, so first one I'm going to go over is Joint Highway Committee. Scott Finlayson, he's with Roosevelt, he's their city manager. He is leading that position. So we have Ryan Clavern, he is Roosevelt's assistant city manager, and he would like to fill that vacancy. And then, give me the second one, I don't know if we want to do it together. There's UCA's, the Utah Communications Authority. South Jordan City Manager Gary Watcott is in that position now, and he just wants to keep his position there. So if we can approve both of those, and then Cam has a couple more to go over.
Perfect. I have updates on the Commission on Housing Affordability and the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, as well as the Outdoor Recreation Committee. So before I get into the details, welcome everybody. It's great to see you. Councilmember McKay, congratulations for making it to the top 3 over the weekend. And I was following it from Twitter so that I didn't have to spend my whole Saturday there, but you should tell your husband and your family that they were fun to watch on social media.
Thank you.
But it's great to see everybody, and hopefully everybody's summers are underway and everyone will have a chance to take a deep breath and spend time with loved ones this summer. On the Commission on Housing Affordability, as we have anticipated for a while, Lehigh Councilor Chris Condi has now submitted his letter of resignation from the CHA. We have forwarded 2 names of people who expressed interest, Draper Mayor Troy Walker and Orem Councilmember Tom McDonald. So we request your approval of those 2 names today, and then we'll submit them to the governor's office to try to get one of them on the commission as soon as possible. So that's the first piece. I'll stop there for a motion, Mayor Silvestrini, and then I'll go into detail about the next one.
Okay, so I think at this point, I would entertain a motion to appoint Ryan Claiborne to the Joint Highway Committee, Gary Watcott to the Utah Communications Authority, Troy Walker and Tom McDonald to the Commission on Housing Affordability.
You know, those 2 names will go to the governor, and then he'll select one.
Okay, so we're appointing 2 and recommending 2.
Correct.
So moved. This is Jewel.
Thank you, Jewel.
Second, Clint Smith.
Okay.
Thanks, Clint. So we have motion by Jewel, seconded by Clint on those. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those members will be appointed or recommended as appropriate. And then Cameron, do you want to talk about the Governor's Office of Management Budget and appointing the distinguished Cameron Deal to that?
Yeah, if I wanted to give some background in addition to what's written in the text, and also give you an update on the Outdoor Recreation Commission. So the Outdoor Recreation Commission, we have 1.5 appointments, one that is league specific and one that is a joint appointment with UAC. Thus far, the names that have applied for the league have not garnered support from UAC, and the names that have applied to UAC have not garnered support from us as a league. So we're still trying to figure out that joint appointment so that we can make the second appointment. Thus far, our applicants include Blandings City Manager David Johnson, Vineyard City Manager Jake McCarr, West Jordan Mayor Dirk Burton, Kaysville City Manager Shane Scott, and Bountiful Councilor Kate Bradshaw. So we do not yet have a recommendation for you on that commission. Within the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, the legislature, with our participation, has set aside $50 million of state ARPA money to create a matching fund. Now, we talked about this at the last board meeting and actually the previous board meeting to that. They have requested a selection committee that will include 2 legislators, a rep from the league, a rep from UAC, and a rep from GOPB. The rep from GOPB will likely be Sophia DeCaro, who is the director of GOPB. The rep from the House will likely be Representative Carl Albrecht. The rep from the Senate will be Senator Kirk Cullimore. And then the request from House and Senate leadership and from Sophia was for me to represent the league. The thinking was this: every city has the possibility of applying for dollars from this matching fund. It currently has 50 million. There's talk that it could increase depending on the amount of applications. So they wanted someone who represented cities, but didn't directly represent a city that could create a perceived conflict of interest. We represent everyone, no one apparently. So that's why we as staff talked about it, felt like it did make sense for me to do it. UAC is having the same conversation about having Brandy Grace be their representative. This program will be up and running by the end of July. That's the plan, is to be accepting applications in August. So any questions about this? And if there aren't any questions, then Mayor Silvestrini, you could take a motion, but I wanted to give that background.
Yeah, and let me just say, I think that I agree with the staff's recommendation about Cameron serving in that position. I think he does have the ability to represent all of us throughout the league, and also has familiarity with the ARPA funds. So if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to appoint Cam to that position of that GOMB.
Carrie Malkovich, so moved.
Is there a second?
Dustin White, second.
Nick,
Dustin, so,
second.
okay, multiple seconds. So if there's any further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good luck, Cam. Go get it. So we're so on the other position that we're just going to wait and see if we can form some consensus with UAC.
Yep, on the outdoor rec, we'll coordinate with the officers as we keep working with UAC to make sure there's balanced representation there.
Okay. All right, I think that takes care of the appointments then, correct?
Correct.
All right, so then we're off to budget presentation by Cam and Nick. And then after the conclusion of that, we need to adopt the budget, correct?
So Nick, I'll let you take a moment to walk through the budget memo, and then Wayne be on standby with slide number 3 for that quick update.
Okay, we have an extensive budget memo for you here. You can see, just kidding. There are no changes whatsoever to the tentative budget. So we did include the memo from our last meeting and that document, as well as what will be our official document as the proposed budget for this year. If there are any questions on what we presented last time, Pam and I are happy to present there. Overall, we have a $3,224,000 budget for upcoming fiscal year 2022. Sorry. Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Apologies. Lot going on here. That is the proposed budget, same as the tentative budget from last time, and happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Nick? Not seeing any.
Yeah, so before we make the motion, I just want to put on the radar that there likely will be a budget amendment on staffing as we get into the year. As you hopefully all saw on Friday Facts, stop share Nick, and Wayne, will you share slide 3? Victoria Ashby, our Director of Government Relations, left the league last Friday. She was phenomenal. We will very much miss her. And the reason for her departure really did come back down to work-life balance. And this came as a shock to me, but she told me repeatedly during the session, and then just emphasized it after the session, that even at Ledge Research, where I always felt like they had the toughest jobs during the session, she said that the stress level, the intensity, and the amount of work on league staff far exceeded legislative research and general counsel, which is always a tough thing to discuss with someone. So we will very much miss her. Where she was at career-wise and family-wise, she needed to make that choice. I'm very supportive of her putting her family first. It does mean that we have a huge hole to fill. And so we were in the process of trying to expand the bandwidth. As you can see on the screen, we're actively soliciting another legislative research analyst, which is Carson's role, so adding another person there. The ARPA analyst, based on what ARPA dollars come in from cities, trying to hire a person there. We have RFQs out on economic development and infrastructure, the housing costs and impacts results. Gardner Policy Institute's considering one. And then I spoke with Louis Young and Zions Bank last week, who are considering the other. So we are trying to expand our bandwidth as best we can with our existing resources. It was demoralizing to find out the other day that we met with the Libertas Institute, and they told us that they just this spring have expanded their staff from 12 to 20. And here we are searching through couch cushions, trying just to get another couple of people. So we just need to be clear about that. Victoria will leave a big hole. We are trying to cast a wide net to replace her. We have expanded our partnership with Hayes, Godfrey, and Bell. In fact, Todd Godfrey's here with us today, who will be providing the legal Q&A service in addition to higher engagement in the land use space with all of the issues circling around housing and growth policy. We're thrilled to have Todd. We've been in discussions with our extended family about potential contracts there. And then, of course, the city's work campaign, which was Victoria's brainchild of trying to get every city to engage with their legislators immediately. I met with a senior staffer in the governor's office last week and just had a very candid off the record conversation about what we needed to do as a league. And this person said point blank, your members need to be meeting with legislators throughout the year so that they are hearing that perspective. If your members aren't doing that, then they're asking the impossible at the Capitol. So that was coming from a senior staffer in the governor's office. With these new staffers, our plan was to put these two new staffers heavily into city's work, introduce them to the membership, and connect them to our legislators, arrange meetings and lunches and other things. So watch for that once we get these two positions filled. When we hired Victoria and Rachel prior to that, it took several months to fill those positions. So I'm hoping for a faster time frame this summer, but knowing that to get the right person in place, it can take a while. So we will do our best, and we're open to any and all suggestions for the Director of Government Relations and the other positions. So at this point, we're not asking for a budget amendment. Mayor Silvestrini, it's possible that as these pieces fill in, that we may come back with a budget amendment in the staffing section.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any questions for Cam or Nick? If there are none, then I will entertain a motion to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2022 budget.
Gary Hill, so moved.
Jewel Allen, second.
Okay, Jewel, I think you got it. Motion by Gary, seconded by Jewel to adopt the budget. Discussion. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the budget is approved. Thank you. Now let's move on to the fraud risk assessment. Nick, why don't you go ahead with that?
Excellent. I'll start by sharing my screen. If you remember from last year, fiscal year 21 was the first year that fiscal year 20 was the first year in which we were required to fill out the Office of the State Auditor's fraud risk assessment. This is a one-size-fits-all, and I do mean all, document for all governmental entities in the state to assess whether or not your policies in place have a high risk for fraud. Last year, we were at the top score of the moderate risk range because we did not have an audit committee, which we put together. So for this fiscal year 21, we have moved into the low risk range assessment. We have to file this with the state auditor once it is approved, and you can see our checklist here to total up our score to 335, right in the middle of that low range there. Happy to answer any questions anyone has, and once this is approved, we'll file it with the state auditor.
Thanks, Nick. One question I have. I presume that a number of us have completed, as board members, have completed the required training to be a district board member. I know that I have. I guess, do we have a record of who's reported that they have completed that training?
We do not. Most everyone has to do it as a member of their city. And we thought we might be able to include that because it's required of you. However, as a board, we have not provided any training to this board specifically for the district training.
No, and there's an online, online training through the auditor's office, and there's a test that you have to take. It's one of those maddening tests where if you miss one, you have to go back and redo the whole section and read through all the pages and all that. You're punished for not writing your answers down on a piece of paper so that you can remember them and do them quickly. But anyway, I would just suggest that if board members, if league board members have actually completed that training, if you could send an email to Nick and let him know, let's track that, because that may be something we can meet. I don't know whether it has to be, universal or if it's a majority of board members or how that works, but that's one that's a box we could check if some of us are doing it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to continue to bring that score up. So this we would approve for policies applicable to fiscal year 21. And that would be great if we could look into that, get another box on here checked. And for the upcoming fiscal year 22, get to see that score increase as well.
Okay. So with that said, then I think we need a motion to accept the fraud risk assessment as it's been prepared. Unless anybody has any other questions.
I'll make that motion, Nick Castleton.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Andy Bierman.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that is approved. And then somebody posted in the chat, wanted a link to the training, and we will put that in there. It's training.auditor.utah.gov, I guess. So is that in the chat? Let's put that in the chat for people. Okay, thank you on that. Then personnel and accounting policy updates. Nick.
Right, just a moment as I get this up into the chat.
Here you go.
Look at you.
Okay. Okay, we are proposing some changes to our current paid time off policies. Cam and I have worked very closely with Mayor Caldwell on this as we were putting it together as well with our training consultant, John Park, former city manager of Cottonwood Heights. Currently, we have no cap on sick hours. And that made sense previously when we did not have a family medical leave policy in place. We did have individual maternity and paternity policies that relied on accumulation of sick time. Currently, we do have a 240-hour cap on vacation hours and no method with which to cash those out other than termination. In sick time, we are able to cash out once a year, a max of 32 hours. If after cash out, you have 240 hours left. We did institute a family medical leave policy that gives 6 weeks paid time off and allows for an additional 6 weeks in which you can use either any of your PTO, whether that is vacation or sick, or take it unpaid if you would like. With that, we, by implementing that, our accumulation of sick time, which is already uncapped, is not used as much for those who take, you don't use as much sick time when you take family medical leave, so those amounts continue to rise. What we're concerned about, what I just described there, is that they continue to rise because of our family medical leave. This is not a problem we're dealing with currently, but we could in the future, where long-term employees have a massive amount of sick time accrual, no way to benefit from that except for once a year, only 32 hours cashing out, which entities have run into sick time abuse because of that. As you reach the end of the career, taking a bunch of this sick time is the only way to really benefit from it since it can't be monetized. And as a small organization, we hurt particularly by loss of employee bandwidth, so people taking time off. So we have a proposal and right now we've kind of, both types of paid time off are slightly monetized. We have to cash out people at termination with vacation time, but we do not with sick time. But you can cash out once a year with sick time, but not with vacation time. So they're both partially monetized, but not all the way through. So our proposal is to cap sick hours at 400. And once that cap is reached, the sick hours would convert to vacation hours at 50%. We still do not cash out sick time at termination. and the accumulation rate stays the same in both of these. We would then institute a 300-hour annual cap and not have it use it or lose it anymore. But once a year, you either have to use anything over 300 hours or cash that out. Employees with at least 240 vacation hours are allowed to cash out semi-annually, either at the end of the year here in June or mid-year in December, which would effectively give them a chance to cash out in time for Christmas, since we do not have a bonus program at all in place. They can only cash out if they have used 20 or 40 hours of some type of PTO. And this is our mechanism to make sure people are actually using some PTO to prevent employee burnout and make sure people aren't, never taking any time off. We hope long-term, this would prevent these massive hours of sick time building up, prevent sick time abuse. There is this flexibility between, with the vacation hours between 240 and 300, where an employee would have a choice to hang on to those or to cash out. And then having that cap at 300 makes it so that we have to deal with it every year rather than accumulating some type of long-term liability with no cap with the vacation hours. This way, we clarify what type of PTO is monetized. Sick time now is completely unmonetized. It converts to vacation, but we have to cash out vacation at termination, and we have that window where we can cash out vacation for employees who have been here long enough to build it up. So there's an incentive to stick around here. And there is a restorative factor that comes from money, from cash. So we hope that will provide some flexibility for our longer term employees, particularly some of the busier ones that may not have time to take time off as much as we would hope. So we do estimate that this would cost under $13,000 this year to readjust all that sick time.
Clarify, this year, isn't this fiscal year?
This fiscal year, yes. So within fiscal year 2021. And then we would budget for potential cash outs each year. And that would be that max, or that would be anything over 300, or any employees that have 240 up to 300, much smaller amounts ongoing, with just the one time of converting a bunch of that sick time over for 2 senior employees. Happy to answer any questions. And Cam, anything you want to add as we've gone through this?
If there are any questions.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions, I guess. So I'll just say, first of all, I think that having a policy like this is advisable to avoid a liability building up that could actually affect operations on a surprise way. I think most entities, including the private sector, have some kind of cap. And I think also that at least in the private sector, sometimes if you have accrued sick time, you don't use it, you just lose it completely. It's not like vacation where you may be compensated. So I think it's generous to allow the conversion of that to 50% vacation time, frankly. So I support doing that. I guess the questions that I have are, do we have a lot of employees that already have this time built up? And has there been any kind of internal communication with staff? Are we going to be surprising anybody by adopting this, or prejudicing them basically because they haven't had to behave this way in them?
Correct. So Dave, let me address those questions. First, we presented this to staff last week before we put it in the board packet to get feedback from staff, and generally staff was supportive of it. The second piece, we set the caps in part after looking at where employees were, trying to figure out what the right policy was, and then seeing basically how much it would cost the organization when we set those caps. So the 300, 400 caps would affect, as of now, 2 employees. Affect Nick Jarvis and me because we've been here the longest. For the employees that have been here kind of a medium amount of time, their getting closer to those caps. But once they get to the caps, that's where the flexibility comes in. So we're trying to build it in such a way to incentivize employees to stick around, but not necessarily incentivize never using sick or vacation days.
So are you going to cash some sick time out and then go to the Jazz games, the away games? Or are you going to save it for the youth?
Let's see what happens tonight.
Are there any other questions by board members with respect to these policies?
I just questioned Marshall. Yeah, Marsha White, just
Hi, Marcia.
quick question. Hi there. Hey, from a family medical leave, as far as pregnancy, can you, and those kind of things, that's not addressed under here, correct?
Correct. So we have a particular family medical leave policy that was adopted, I think I put it on here, 2018, I believe, that or 2019, that addresses that specifically. This is kind of fixing our old system that didn't have that in there. And our family medical leave policy is based off of FMLA as far as what events qualify for that, and birth of a child, adoption, taking care of a sick parent, et cetera, are all part of that. And it ties into it a little bit, but we all say 12 weeks FML leave, and 6 of which is just straight up FML leave, and 6 of which an employee can use their sick time that they've accumulated. They can use vacation time to take it paid, and then they can also take the time off unpaid for those 6 weeks. That is also an option. So no, this doesn't address any of that, but we do have a policy in place to address that.
Does that answer your question, Marcia?
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that we were covering all bases. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Andy, and it's just related to the sick leave. It seemed like that number was a little bit high compared to industry standards. I was wondering how you derive that.
So I looked at a few examples, and like Cam mentioned, entities do really look at, what is a baseline policy type number, and then how does it really affect our organization. Some that I had looked at were as high as 480, and we did look as low as 300, and we thought 400 was a nice number based on the situation we have and what other entities have done in the past.
Nick, actually, I was referring to the accrual rate, not the cap.
Oh, I'm sorry. What accrual rate are we talking? 4 hours a pay period?
Is that been?
Yes.
The same as that's not something we're changing. That's been there.
That's something we don't change, that we don't address in this policy, but that's what it has been since I was hired. That it's 12 sick days a year. That's also where vacation starts out. The vacation accumulation starts out as well.
Okay, fair enough. If it's already set, it's a non-starter. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? If not, then I'll entertain a motion with respect to this PTO policy change.
I'll motion to approve it.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a second?
I'll take that as a second.
Yes, that's what I heard.
That sounded like a second, either a second or a barking dog.
If that's not a second, I'll second it.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve these policy changes. If there's no further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Sorry about the barking dog.
I'm going to take that as an aye. All right, those are approved. All right, then let's talk about organizational legal. Cameron.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. The crux of today's meeting is item number 9 with Natalie Gochner, and then our prioritization effort of all the different wish list items on housing. So before we get to that, I want to hit these two issues, the future of Metro Townships within the league, and then the Garrity decision at this before the State Records Committee. So Wayne, let Wayne share his screen, Nick, for the Metro Township slide. Last summer, representatives from the 5 Metro Townships in Salt Lake County presented to the league board and had a twofold request. Request number 1 was for support of legislation around the franchise tax. Or request number 2 was about membership within the league. Currently, only cities and towns can be dues paying members of the league. Metro Townships do not fit within the definition. The decision at the board at the time was to support their legislative efforts. Actually, it was on the municipal energy tax, and to postpone the discussion about whether Metro Townships could join the League of Cities and Towns. On this slide, I have quickly summarized the history of Metro Townships in Salt Lake County. Mayor Silvestrini, the emphasis is on quickly because you have the scars from a lot of these discussions. But back in 2015, 5 communities incorporated as Metro Townships in Salt Lake County, but they were still in many ways tied to Salt Lake County. As a result, 2 years later, when I was hired and Councilmember Mendenhall chaired our Constitution Review Committee, and many of your cities participate in that review committee, we discussed specifically whether Metro Townships should be able to join the league. At the time, the review committee declined, mainly because they felt like Metro Townships were not municipalities yet, that they were this quasi-state, and there was concern that they were too close with the counties. There was also specific feedback from Sandy, West Valley, and Salt Lake, who have long and tortured histories with some of these communities that became Metro Townships. Subsequent to that time, there have been bills every session that have cut ties and cut cords between Salt Lake County and the Metro Townships, to where in many ways they are standing more on their own now than ever before. As a result, we have a decision to make. It doesn't have to be made today, but our Constitution can only be amended by the general membership, which will occur at the annual convention. And so if the board wants to pursue potential membership for Metro Townships, we as staff would need to prepare potential constitutional amendment. There are benefits to the Metro Townships joining. If all 5 were to join, we estimate that their dues, membership dues, would be in excess of $25,000. They are already participating in most of our training. In fact, the Utah City Management Association is now the Utah City and County Management Association, in part to be more inclusive of county managers, but I think also in part because 2 of the Metro Townships have professional management, and so UCMA has changed their bylaws to embrace them. Membership benefits bring voting privileges at LPC and with the board and at conventions. It also means they can be involved in the legislative prioritization process. And frankly, the last couple of years, we've worked with some of their representatives on bills that impact cities and Metro Townships. So what we need, Mayor Silvestrini, from the board is one of 2 options. Well, actually 1 of 3 options. Option number 1 that I did put up there is that we just stay silent on Metro Townships and we don't make any changes at annual. Option 1 that's listed as a staff recommendation would be that either the board right now just decides to prepare an amendment, or the board could create a subgroup, either this board or just some key people within Salt Lake County, to finalize the approach of Metro Townships and report back before annual with the potential amendment. So from a staff position, our staff recommendation would be to address Metro Townships one way or the other. Either give us direction right now to just move forward with an amendment, or if you're not ready to do that, authorize the creation of a small subgroup within the county, and we can bring back the recommendation before annual.
I have some things to add to this. I participated in advocating for the Metro Townships to obtain the authority to be able to levy a telecommunications and franchise tax, basically, at the legislature this last session. They've been moving more and more toward being like a city or a town. There really isn't a lot of distinction on that. No more Metro Townships can be created in the state, by at least unless the legislature permits that to happen. And And there are probably close to 70,000 Utah residents who live in Metro Townships in Salt Lake County. The two biggest ones, Magna and Kearns. Kearns is like 37,000 people, and Magna is about 27,000. And the others are smaller, but those are significant communities, larger in fact than many of our members. And I think they would be valuable contributors to the league. But I also think it makes sense to create a subgroup to study this, just because I think, especially outside of Salt Lake County, many people are unfamiliar with this form of government. And I think, studying that, making sure that that we as a board have a subgroup that addresses any potential issues with them being members, so that we can address that at the annual meeting, I think would be advisable. So I think it makes sense to study it, but frankly, it's kind of hard for me to think why they shouldn't be able to be members of the league. So, are there anybody else have any views on this or comments? Nobody's speaking up, so do you want direction on this then, Cam?
Yeah, our staff recommendation is either 1 or 2. So Nick, will you move that so the board can see it? So either the board recommends now to prepare the constitutional amendment or create the subgroup to bring back the recommendation.
I'll entertain a motion. I don't know, can the chair make a motion?
Yep.
If I can
Mr.
make a
Chair, I'll
motion.
make a motion if you'd like. This is Andy.
Okay, Andy.
So for next steps, I'd say the board recommends a constitutional amendment and creates a subgroup to bring back the recommendation before the annual meeting.
Yep, that'll work.
Okay, is there a second?
I second that. I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay, thank you very much. Is it Mayor Harvey?
No, those are Castleton.
Gaston, okay, sorry. Okay, we have a motion and a second then to explore, I guess, recommend an amendment, but also to create a subgroup to be able to speak to this at the annual convention. So any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Not even the dog? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's now move on
Dog
to,
went to sleep. They went on the next room and went to sleep. So, it's getting to be a long, boring meeting for them. So they said they're out.
thank you, Mayor. Okay, let's move to agenda item 9 then.
Well, sorry, the second bullet point on number 8.
Oh,
So back to Wayne, yeah, next.
Garrity.
To
Yeah,
Garrity,
sorry.
yeah. Many of you were here when the league created an amicus program in order to file friends of the court briefs. This is not quite a friend of the court, so it doesn't fit in the amicus policy. That's why I'm bringing it to the board for approval. Mayor Silvestrini, Mayor Wilson Edwards, Councilman Allen, all serve on that amicus subgroup. This is not an amicus per se, but the philosophy is comparable. The week of mid-year, the State Records Committee ruled against West Jordan and other cities on a very important policy issue that gets to what's known as a Garrity warning, a Garrity interview. A Garrity interview is what a public employee will give. Often it's police, but this actually applies to all public employees. When there's a critical incident, officer-involved critical incident, and they give this candid and voluntary interview for employment law purposes, and it is not admissible in court. This is an effort to respect the right to remain silent of these public employees in a criminal proceeding, but also recognize that employers have an obligation to try to understand what took place in the critical incident, and the public employee needs to have a voice to explain what happened. So this legal doctrine predates my life. It's been around for decades, this Garrity doctrine. Well, from my perspective, unfortunately and tragically, the State Records Committee in April ruled that a Garrity interview in an officer-involved critical incident in West Jordan and Cottonwood Heights should be disclosed to the media and thus should be treated as a public record. So you can imagine now what this would mean for police officers and public employees who, under the status quo, would give a guarantee interview to the city for employment law purposes, and it wouldn't be admissible in court, but it could show up on the front page of the newspaper. So as a result, West Jordan and Conwood Heights, well, let me back up. West Jordan plans to appeal. I met with their legal counsel, and they are looking for financial support to hire outside counsel. As Roger and I discussed the league's role on this, this policy issue is a top 3 priority of our Loveless and Lee Task Force when they prioritized last month. And the general counsel that West Jordan has selected participates regularly in our task force. But because this is independent of our amicus process, Roger nor I felt comfortable saying yes without having some, at the very least, this type of deliberation, Marissa Bastrini, about contributing to hire this outside counsel. So the sentiment is similar to an amicus brief. This is an issue that will affect every city, like it checks all of the amicus boxes, other than it's not an amicus brief. It's bringing in this outside counsel to argue at the district court. District courts don't allow amicus briefs, but we would help with the arguments as they prepare that district court argument, because the State Records Committee decision now goes to district court, and West Jordan's looking for help on behalf of all cities. So we would welcome a motion about whether to support this financially.
So I can address this. So I with some of the other board members here, sit on that Loveless and Lee Task Force, and we had a pretty robust discussion at our last meeting. I think it was our last meeting, with some of the police chiefs that sit on that, about their concern about the fact that officers, have already, in some cases, have already given these interviews based upon the understanding that what they say will not be used later. And frankly, that it may affect their willingness to either participate or to be candid, and really hinder municipalities' ability to get to the bottom of what actually happened in a situation if people are reluctant to talk because what they say can be made public or can be subject to it used in another proceeding. So this is a big issue, especially in terms of the priorities of the police forces of many of our members. And frankly, it's a tool that enables local governments to improve and get things better, make things better if they find out what actually happened. If people clam up on us, and I know this is another issue that happens even when the district attorney's office is trying to explore, use of force and try to determine whether they can charge it or whether it's justified or all that. If people won't talk to them about this, which is a more common trend on a Fifth Amendment basis, it really limits the ability to find out what happened. It doesn't serve the public's interest, I don't think. And there may be other ways to get at information in a way that that will give that where people who didn't want to talk wouldn't have to speak. But this is a concern I think that merits supporting West Jordan and Cottonwood Heights on this.
Mayor, this is Gary. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I would just say this for anyone who has concerns. This isn't about protecting bad employees. This is about protecting good employees who would otherwise be reluctant, who otherwise would be willing to speak up, but now for fear of whatever it may be, putting their jobs in jeopardy or other criminal allegations.
Or even public attention because they said something.
This is going to dramatically slow down our ability to get to the bottom of things, whether they be criminal or not. And so I think it's really important that the league support this. I would make that motion that we provide financial support to help West Jordan.
I agree. I'll second that motion. Nick Castleton.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a motion and a second then to support West Jordan on the security issue. Any further discussion? Okay, then all in favor of the motion? Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. You get the direction.
Perfect.
Okay, now we'll turn to item number 9.
Yes, terrific. Over the next 70 minutes, our plan is to request your assistance at prioritizing the housing wish list that we discussed with you at the last meeting. And we feel like before we dove into the weeds, it would be helpful to have a big picture perspective of the challenges of growth and the trends that we're seeing in Utah as we transition through the pandemic. The immediate person that came to mind to invite to set up this conversation was my good friend and colleague Natalie Goffner, who's the director of the Kinsey Gardner Policy Institute. She wears many titles. She's the associate dean in the Eccles School of Business, as well as the economist for the Salt Lake Chamber. I've known Natalie a very long time, and I've always appreciated her thoughtful approach to public policy. I'm on the advisory committee at the Gardner Policy Institute, and one of the strategic initiatives that we've been discussing with Gardner is to try to get some of these bigger trend topics around demographic changes, growth, what Utah will look like post-pandemic, and the research they're doing into the hands of local policymakers, which we hope to be doing through this upcoming election cycle. I also want to acknowledge and thank Natalie, because there have been times where I've reached out to her. I'll give one example where I hosted state league directors from around the West, and she spent an evening with us talking about the success story that is Utah, and gave of her time and insight that night with those other state league directors. So we'll turn it over to Natalie for the next 10 minutes or so to give that big picture perspective, which will then set up our policy prioritization discussion. Natalie will have a few minutes afterwards for some questions as well, if you have any. So Natalie, thank you very much for joining us, and take it away.
You got it. Thanks so much, Cam. Great to see all of you. And I do appreciate the partnership that the Gardner Institute shares with the League. And Cameron is on our advisory board at the Gardner Institute, so we talk a lot. I also want to congratulate Tawny McKay for being one of 3 finalists for the state treasurer position. I'm really excited about that, Tawny. Nice to see you on the call.
Natalie.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Listen, I got 10 minutes and I put a pretty big topic there, post-pandemic Utah. Wish me luck trying to do that in 10 minutes. But what I'm going to do is just share a few insights, some things, and hopefully it'll help inform your discussion. And I wanted to just start out by just pausing for a minute and just looking at a map of job change for all 50 states over the past 2 years. So April of 2019 to April of 2021. We have to just kind of cut out the pandemic year because it's a trough and a comeback. But you get a sense for how privileged the Utah, and in this case Idaho, position is. The nation contracts over this time period by 4%. And Utah comes in as the second fastest growing job growth state. We're usually 1, 2, or 3 and have maintained that status throughout the pandemic. If you also look at metro areas, so each of these dots is a large metro area. And in this case, you want to be one of these lighter colored dots, the kind of cream colored. And all of Utah's metro areas, as well as Idaho's, show up in that either very small contraction or actually a growing category. So everything we say about post-pandemic Utah has to be informed by the idea that we're in a growth mode, a nation leading mode, and it makes it everything easier, even though it's a challenge. Arundhati Roy is an author that I follow, and very early on in the pandemic, she said that historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. And I do believe as an economist that that's true. And in economics, we're always looking at cyclical things like the business cycle, the ebb and flow of market corrections, and then booms and busts. And then we're looking at structural changes, things that occur and stay with us. So this is just showing the magnitude over time. And the pandemic, that's what Arundhati Roy is saying, is that it creates structural changes. So Cam said, help kind of lay the groundwork for what's different post-pandemic. And usually structural changes fall into demographic, technological, or behavioral. So Zoom towns would be an example of a demographic change. Technological advancement, the acceleration of online education, telehealth, remote sales, work from home, that also falls into the behavioral changes in preferences. But the idea is that all of these things are happening simultaneously and creating a very different Utah. And we're still obviously sorting all of that out. The one thing that just strikes me as a constant, and I think it's really important for you to keep in the back of your mind, is that growth continues to be Utah's constant companion. And we did in late April get the decennial census results, and nobody knew what they were going to be. I'm watching it live, but it was no surprise to me that we came up as the state with the fastest population growth over the decade of 18.4%. That's actually head and shoulders above really, most states. The nation over this time is less than 8%. So you get a sense of how different it is. When you look at the components of that growth, and again, this is really accurate data. We only get this accurate of data once every decade, but 2/3, 65% has come from natural increase. So even with a declining fertility rate, even with in-migration, we are still the greatest contributor to our population growth as Utahns through our births. But it's also quite amazing that we, had a net gain of over 177,000 people through net migration over the decade. That's a very large city in our state. We've done these Utah Economist covers to show this exodus to Zion, and yes, we do believe that a high percentage, it's not the majority, but somewhere around 25% are coming from California, and that's seems to be something that's playing out. LinkedIn is a really interesting research entity as much as it is a social media and relationship management site. They have a research team that looked at how people changed their place of residence on their profiles. And the Salt Lake City Metro had the biggest gain in net arrivals of any metro in the country. So this growth is just a really dominant theme and something we have to remind ourselves about. In the area of behavioral change and technological change, I'll show you a couple of Economist covers. Home sweet office. I'm at home right now. I live in Murray. But a lot of things have come with this, right? We also have what is frequently referred to as the reckoning of commercial real estate. So commercial real estate includes hotels, includes restaurants, includes office space. And about a year ago, I saw this quote in The Economist magazine. I wanted to share it with you. And yes, they spell behavior with a U in The Economist magazine, but they said property has long been a slow-moving asset class because leases last for years and tenants normally change their behavior only gradually. Landlords and their financial backers have thus got used to a business that moves at a glacial pace. So speaking about commercial real estate. For 2 decades, a reliably easy way to make money has been to buy a commercial building and go to sleep. Time to wake up. And I thought that tells the story as well as any graphic I can share. I will say that when I interact with large landlords, property owners, leasers in the commercial space, they haven't yet decided whether the social distancing and the new public health awareness and the spacing of people will offset the interest of people wanting to work from home or a hybrid arrangement. But the whole point is that no matter what happens, you have to be in the game, right? You have to be attentive because it's a transitionary phase for commercial real estate. Just to also kind of drop down some things in the structural changes or things that are affecting us. There is broad consensus that the U.S. is sitting right now on trillions of dollars of excess savings. Now that's a weird term, excess savings, but what we would do is we'd say, in normal times, how much would we have saved during 2020? And then, in fact, how much did we save? And anybody that works in banking or, follows financial services knows that deposits are way up. They're way up. And they're up in part because, there's many people that weren't that impacted by the pandemic. But they had nowhere to spend, right? They couldn't travel as much as they liked to. They had concerns, and so people saved a lot. I'm giving you a couple of data points to think through, but this is a U.S. data, and we can try and estimate Utah. But the idea is that as you're making decisions as city leaders, do know that there's a lot of cash in the economy right now. Retail sales is the absolute biggest surprise of the pandemic in Utah. And there's a lot of ways that I could show it, but I just showed you the total retail sales in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And, you would have expected 2020 to drop. You would have expected maybe to be flat, but for it to have that kind of growth. And we know some of this is the online reporting and just our difficulty in knowing how much of online sales was being reported in these prior years or wasn't being reported. But as city leaders that sales tax revenue has been a complete surprise during the pandemic. Lastly, Cam wanted me to just touch on a couple of hot spots, and then I'll open it up to discussion. And so I picked infrastructure and housing. I'm going to do that in reverse order. The Gardner Institute maintains a database on housing data, and we also do a lot of demographic work on household formation. And so we're showing in black the dwelling units, in red the households. And normally you have, more households formed, and you can kind of see the differences between that. And you can see that the gap that's created when you have more households formed than dwelling units built. And right now we estimate a cumulative shortage of about 44,500 units that our market is short. And you might say, well, why is that? Well, there's supply constraints, there's really high demand. And so here we find ourselves. And our thinking at the Gardner Institute is it's going to take us a decade to work our way out of this. So that is something that's here to stay. This data point is really best shown if I do it like this. This is the median sales price of a home in 2020, and here's where it's already gotten to in 2021. And we have Washington County right now as the most expensive median sales price of homes in our state. So the housing industry is the industry to pay attention to right now, and something of real concern. I mentioned there's a lot of cash in the economy. I wanted to give you a sense of how big the stimulus has been. You know this in local government with your $1.1 billion of American Rescue Plan Act money. But just you get a sense of how big the stimulus was during the Great Recession here, and you can see where it is here. Upwards of 25% of GDP has come in stimulus dollars. And, we've got the infrastructure bill that we're hoping will come through in some way, shape, or form. And this is just really interesting data that goes all the way back to the 40s, 50s, and shows you infrastructure spending in our nation as a percent of GDP. This is the federal highways being built, but you can see this decades-long decline. And, you could argue that we've been living off of past investment in infrastructure. Fortunately, in Utah, our investment in infrastructure, in this case structures as a percent of GDP, is among the highest in the nation. I'm sorry this doesn't have a date on it, but I believe this is for 2019. So some positive news there, but more to come. Cam and everyone, I'll just close. This is a Vladimir Lenin quote. I just think it's insightful. I'm not really fond of the person that said it, but he said, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And in our case, there's a year when decades happen. And I guess I would just suggest to you that what's happened in the past year has been like a decade in terms of how it accelerated online education, how it accelerated remote sales, how it changed the way that we work from home, how it affects behavioral decisions about travel and commercial real estate and those sorts of things. And so as leaders, you've got a lot of challenges. It's a very dynamic environment, and the stakes are high. So Cam, I'll turn it back to you. I'm happy to stay with you here for 10 minutes or so if you want to discuss these trends I've laid out or anything else you think I can help with.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalie. That was terrific. I heard Natalie give this presentation on multiple occasions as well, trying to figure out what Utah is going to look like in the years to come. So thank you very much. Mayor Silvestrini, I'll turn to you to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, so are there any questions? I just want to preface this, I want to honor Dr. Gutner's time, and we have some things we need to settle on, but other questions for Dr. Gutner? I'm not trying to discourage that, but Natalie, I want to thank you for the work that you do. And I mean, we arm ourselves with this in local government when we go into the arena and try to engage with our residents about why property rights and the housing demand sometimes require us to approve high density multifamily housing and things like that. And while we try to honor the public input that we can, I think you have the leaders on this in terms of trying to plan for growth, particularly as we work with our legislature, which has been pushing us with a cattle prod basically in that direction. So.
Amen. I will say, Cam knows this because he grew up in Murray as well, and I'm a transplant to Murray, but I know what great city services are because of living in Murray. And I don't think I'll offend anyone when I say I grew up in unincorporated Salt Lake County, and it was a big difference.
Well, and speaking of that, I know from talking with people in Murray that city leaders are actually concerned about some of the pushback that they're getting from Murray residents about the problems that we're trying to address. And I think, I mean, the information that you developed really is useful in terms of being able to enable us to talk to our residents about, the stunning fact that 2/3 of this growth is internal.
Yeah.
It's our kids and our grandkids.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Great. I'll sign off. Thanks for all the great work you do. And I will get these slides to Cam and Nick and share them with you all. And if there's something more we can do, let us know.
All right. Thanks a
Perfect.
lot.
Well, and Natalie, thank you again for the partnership, and we'll be in touch about convention. You're newly elected, because even on this call, we have people who won't be in office come next January, and this dialogue will continue. So thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Perfect. Mayor Silvestrini, with Natalie as the backdrop there. Nick, will you let Wayne share his screen, and then we'll go to Carson?
PowerPoint or the list?
PowerPoint slide 10. Here's what we hope to accomplish in these next few minutes. The House legislative leadership in particular, but the governor and House and Senate leadership are looking for they're looking for the lead to lead out on important but tricky conversations around housing and growth. You'll see in the top in the black the other big issues that are out there that we are not focusing on today. But in red, we're going to talk about how to respond to some of these. Well, let me back up. We're going to talk about the wish list that we sent out, the league wish list that we created based on feedback from you, and prioritize which ones we think will have the biggest impact. So as the dialogue continues this summer, we as staff and the officers are prepared with how to advocate for cities. One thing I'll mention on number 4, this outdated local sales tax structure, is we are in the process of doing some research about the changes, or better put, the impact on the 50/50 formula from online sales over the last couple of years. And we take notion with that term of outdated, but that is the exact term that is being presented to the House Republican caucus tomorrow in their caucus meeting about the need to change the outdated local sales tax structure. Likewise, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, you can go to well, actually keep it here. They'll be reviewing sales tax. Property Rights Coalition, as you saw in your packet, has brought forward many different ideas, ostensibly to improve housing affordability. Wayne, next slide. There are these 3 different groups looking at growth issues: the Land Use Task Force, the Commission on Housing Affordability, and the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. Over the next few weeks, we as staff will be coordinating with the officers plus our representatives on each of these groups, and then maybe a few others just to fill in the gaps. Officers, just so you're aware, we haven't scheduled an Officers Plus meeting yet because I've been coordinating with the staff who are going to be leading the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission to finalize which additional city people will be on subcommittees. So Mayor Ramsey will be on one, I'll be on one, and there'll be a couple of others we're trying to get in, and then we'll finish the framework for Officers Plus. So that Economic Opportunity Commission is going to have 7 subgroups, one of which is specifically looking at local government. Next slide, Wayne. You know, things are moving fast and furious. So you can see those key dates of when things are happening over the next couple of weeks. So next, I guess one more on this, just on this piece. You know, what we keep being told by leadership is we want to see the league come up with solutions on housing affordability to address bad actor cities and population growth.
And if I can maybe insert this too, because Cameron sent out an email that was sent out to a broad group of state government officials from Chris Grandulis from Ivory Homes, which contained a link to an op-ed in the Washington Post that talked about federal housing policy possibly trying to use sticks and carrots to get cities to address growth or local government, I guess, in general. I saw that and responded to it just because I felt that we needed to be engaged in that conversation. We can't let that kind of stuff be going on, I think, and not address it. I'm going to be meeting with Chris and talking about some of his ideas and concerns, but we do need to be engaged on this, and frankly, adopting some of these matters as priorities or some solutions will help us immensely because of how the legislature is treating this. I know that their discussion is revising the sales tax distribution formula to incentivize multifamily housing and basically to give more to cities that actually change zoning to allow more of it than cities that don't or won't do that. I mean, I think there's a lot of misperception there, but we need to be at the table to be able to preserve the fact that cities are different and not, one size doesn't fit all. And these solutions where they try to make one size fit all are going to be destructive of the kind of communities that we're trying to create. And yes, we all need to do our part. Nobody can sit by and say that, all this growth needs to go someplace else, not in my town, not in my backyard. But we have to be engaged with this and be part of the conversation, or something's going to be fashioned that we won't like.
Yeah. Amen, Mayor. Wait, next slide. So here's what we did as staff to prepare for the discussion for the next few minutes. We took the wish list that we presented to you a month ago. We took the feedback that you gave us that day and feedback we heard from other cities, and we submitted that to the Commission on Housing Affordability. There were 24 items. They sent, the co-chairs, as you recall, came to our board last month and basically said to us, give us your list, we'll take the PRC list, and then let's start talking, right? So we provided a list of 24 items. And in addition to our PRISM, we then went through and created our own little housing framework. Will the policy result in decreased housing prices? Does the policy result in smart planning for growth that residents will support? Who will pay for the impacts of growth, current or future residents, to ensure that cities working are financially sustainable? And do all stakeholders have skin in the game? This is a summary of the framing questions we presented to you last month, and we've tried to simplify down. And then Carson led out for us and took our 24 items and ran them through the 3-part PRISM and the 4-part housing framework, and came up with an internal scoring system that we as staff have prioritized which ones we think are the highest impact, medium impact, lowest impact. What we did in the board packet that we sent to you on Thursday, so we can switch over now to you, Carson, is we sent you all of our wish list items and the PRC's wish list items organized by category and which relevant lead policy platform principle applied. Now we have organized it this way. Hopefully people can see it on the screen share of which ones we thought were the highest impact priorities, medium, and lowest. Our objective in the next half an hour is to confirm that we have indeed prioritized these correctly for the conversation, and get your feedback about whether there's any lines in the sand that are not already clear in our policy platform. Conversely, areas that are the best areas for dialogue with legislators and other stakeholders. So I'm going to stop talking and give everybody a chance to take a breath and review the list that's being shared. The red are the high impact priorities that we've identified based on that scoring system, medium and lowest impact. So we're going to take just a couple minutes, let you review it, and then Marissa Mastrini will come back and let people chat. Can you blow that up a little bit, Carson?
Yeah.
There we go.
Pam, so you said the stuff that's highlighted in red are the most important out of the ones that you picked?
So it's not just that they're highlighted in red, it's that red category, orange category, yellow category.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sorry, we alternated the color to make it easier.
To read, yeah.
Whether that is what happened or not, I'm not sure because I don't have my glasses and I can't really read it, but such is life. Just give that a medium. So if everyone's had a chance to review it again, every item here came from the lead created wish list that we presented last month, and within your packet, now just organized by high, medium, and low impact based on our scoring system. So our first question is, have we correctly identified which ones you think would be the highest impact to potentially decrease housing prices, result in smart planning for growth, ensure that cities are financially sustainable, and follow the principles in our prism? So
Any comments on that? Anybody?
Can you go back down to the yellow ones?
Yep.
The yellow, just so I can read them on the screen.
Yeah, I have a question about medium impact priority, which is incentivizing other property tax entities to participate in RDAs and CRAs. It seems to me that if there was a better way to get those entities to the table, to require them to come to the table and provide both in more financial resources for moderate income housing and for economic development, that's a win-win.
I know that there's some legislative interest in a bill that would require recalcitrant taxing entities to participate. The idea is like if all but one of them is participating and one is holding out, that one holding out would be required to participate based upon some formula on that, because I know there have been issues where school districts, or it isn't always necessarily a school district, but there have been some entities that have not wanted to participate because they believe that accommodating growth might be, create more of a burden upon them than the benefit they're going to get from participating in a CRA. So that's something that we may see in interim or being discussed in interim anyway.
I just know that one of the issues with us participating or not participating, one of the issues we have with housing is finding a revenue source for it. And if we can increase, if we can increase the amount of money available through RDAs, then we can increase the percentage of money that goes towards moderate or low income housing. I would see that as a high impact priority, not a medium impact priority personally.
Marissa Mastrini, we can do this one of two ways. We can either have the board adopt this list and then we can take amendments to move things around on the list, or we can just have the open discussion and we'll keep track as staff of the dialogue and then basically take a vote to see if people are comfortable with
Okay. Does anybody have is everybody okay with that? If you're not okay with that, then speak up.
I'll second what Gary said. I think if we can find a better way to incentivize the other tax sensitive entities to participate in RDAs, that would be a powerful tool. And as it stands, there's no incentive for them to do a traditional RDA. The school districts are always going to go against that, as well as the state school districts, part of that board.
Well, and the other thing that I've seen happen, frankly, is you get approvals from, almost all of them, and then one of them figures that they can get it. They're basically free riding. They're basically saying, no, we won't do that, or we won't do that at that level, even without necessarily a great reason for that. So I think we do need to address that if we're going to use that as a tool to address affordable housing.
This is Jewel. I have a comment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anything addressing school funding here. Am I right? I mean, there's no mention at all. And I know I brought this up before. It's been asked before, but a big concern in our community is, along with growth, is the need for more schools, because the current school sizes are crowded already for the current community. So I don't see how we could continue on this path of just helping moderate housing along without addressing that. And I know it's been tried, it's been attempted in the past, but that it just always comes up. I think it really needs to be addressed. Is there any way we can do it?
Jewel, one thing, I'm going to have Pam answer this, but one of the things that I think we need to remember is that, if an area does accommodate more housing that has more kids, the weighted people unit will shift around to help that to some extent. I mean, I actually think it may be important to kind of stay in the lane of the housing piece, because if we start advocating for more funding for education, we're going to dilute the things that we're concerned about in terms of our local control on the zoning and things like that.
Jeff, this is Carrie Malkovich. I wanted to bring up that as well with Jewel. I mean, we're talking about housing, but we are also talking about the increase of students. What the impact is, we shouldn't be involved in that. But the only way for schools to have physical facilities is by bonding, which is property tax. And that does affect our cities, because the more that school districts bond, then the higher taxes go up, which then comes back to hurt municipalities. No one seems to worry about the schools, but they all complain about taxes for us, even though we only get a small portion of it.
Council members, this is Cameron, and I appreciate the points you both raised, and I think they are both encapsulated in the high impact. On the fourth one down, we intentionally did not number these because we didn't want to give the illusion that one was a top priority and the other was 9, because they all kind of scored together. But if you look at the fourth one down of the improving the truth in taxation process, there are multiple things that we could look at within property tax. Local school districts and cities alike both rely on property tax. And so if we proceed with potential changes to property tax, that in theory should benefit both cities and school districts alike. At the state level, that Unified Economic Opportunity Commission is going to spend a lot of time on what they refer to as economic development policy alignment and taxation alignment. And if Speaker Wilson were here, he would point out that education relies on income tax and property tax, but not sales tax. The state on income tax and sales tax and not property tax, and cities on sales tax and property tax and not income tax. And so he would argue that we are misaligned because those 3 different levels of government all are looking for different things. So I think as part of this conversation around property tax, which is a revenue stream we share with the schools, if we aggressively say in order to be sustainable long-term, we need changes in property tax, that's going to include a conversation about the schools. Now, the other piece that we just talked about, moving up from the medium to the high level about, about incentivizing other taxing entities to participate in RDAs or affordable housing development. This is a tricky one from a principal perspective, because I don't think any city in this room wants the state to come in and dictate how you spend your city property tax dollars. And really what we're trying to do is say, how do we get property tax entities, including school districts, to contribute as much as possible toward solving some of these challenges? So I'm supportive of the motion to move that up to high impact, and that will have a direct correlation on school districts too.
Cameron, I just wanted to clarify, I don't know that we're advocating for a change in the property tax so much as being able to have an impact fee for schools. And I know that there's a resistance there in the legislature as far as adding more impact fees, but honestly, that's the only sustainable way of doing it. We're always behind trying to fund our schools, and if a bonding, if a bonding election fails, then you still have the growth, but you have no schools. So I don't understand how, like, we can't possibly continue doing it this way. And as far as zoning, Mayor Silvestrini, I believe you brought that up, right? You say, oh, I meant that you thought maybe shifting students around. The reality is all schools are crowded. I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of real luxury there, just, waiting for, there's all this space. There's really not.
No, you're correct, and particularly in Grantsville with the amount of growth. I was visiting my wife's grandparents in Grantsville last night. And every time we go out there, there are more and more new subdivisions. So the trick for us is figuring out our lane and staying in it. Schools have wanted impact fee authority for a long time. Impact fees right now are under the gun, period. There are many in the legislature and in the development community that would want to go away from impact fees altogether and say that let's make it easier for cities to raise property tax in lieu of impact fees. We don't need to decide that now, but just know that part of this conversation could eventually turn into that type of deliberation. That's what the co-chairs told us last month as well, is they're trying to balance all of these competing needs. So I think that also gets to the question of who pays for growth, current versus future residents, which is why that's one of our framing questions. So Mayor Silvestrini, open to other thoughts on where things have been grouped.
Anybody else have any ideas that things are misaligned here?
Just one more thing. This is Jewel. I think as I'm looking at this list, I just think it's really hard to reconcile how different some communities are from each other. For instance, I went out to Vineyard. Mayor Fulmer hosted us there for an event recently, and which I really admire their community. It's beautiful. I think they've done well with the growth there, but it's nothing like my community here in Grantsville, where there's still that rural feel. So I think trying to apply some of these housing incentives just feels wrong for us as a community. And I'm wondering if there's other communities feeling that. So I just ask that as some of these priorities are being worked with on the legislative level, that we push that there's no one size fits all, because it, like the growth in Mill Creek, for instance, versus, I don't know, a smaller city near Ogden, it would just be so different. I don't know what the solution is, because obviously we have to be efficient when we push for certain things. But I'm just asking that those things are taken into consideration. Maybe there's some areas that are more amenable to this high density growth versus others. And That's just gonna have to be taken into account. Are we the only community feeling this? I'm just curious about that.
Jewel, this is Julie Fulmer. I think you're touching on something really important. One of the things that I think can come with a different incentivizing is, for instance, it says to improve state transportation plans, planning processes to enhance strategic coordination and facilities, update to local land use plans. So one of the reasons why I think that's important is because, like you were saying, when you first come into the north side of my city, there's a lot of density and it's not going to be accepted, nor does it have a place in every community. But right at the north side, which you may not have been able to see, is a large transportation corridor network. And I think that if we focus on prioritized planning that actually makes sense regionally, there are going to be communities that I think start to be recognized as not the right place for certain types of growth, because part of affordable housing is being able to connect those people to jobs, schools, healthcare facilities. So I think even communities like mine that have this type of housing recognize the things that you're saying.
So maybe we actually need to add something else that isn't in here, even if we didn't mention it at our last session on this, about the fact that the differences in communities need to be recognized as a priority. And that ties into everything that we've been doing in the legislature. It's consistent with our PRISM. It actually is really like a reprise of the accessory dwelling unit conversation that we had with the legislature last session, and we may have made some impact there with that. And so maybe we need to add something here that just to remember that with respect to all of this, while we need to address growth, and I think every community needs to be a part of that. We don't all have to do it in the same way. And frankly, for the state to force a uniform solution there is actually going to be destructive of a lot of communities and the things that people value in them.
I appreciate that, Mayor Silvestrini. I agree. That would be great.
Yeah, I think that's well put, Mayor Silvestrini. And I know this is what we're for, not what we're against, but I do think we need to prioritize protecting the sales tax distribution formula, because that is one of those things that could have dramatic effects on different communities with big winners and losers. And I understand the Property Rights Coalition wants to push for that, but that's already in place to some degree, where property taxes already incentivize growth if you want to gain new revenues for your community. So to do the same for sales tax could be it could be catastrophic for some of us.
Mayor Silvestrini, can I address Mayor Bierman's point? Sure. First, agree on the location matters principle, and we can work that into the regional framing questions. That's where I think it makes the most sense, because our goal with these framing questions is to bring them up in every meeting and just keep trying to drive the point back to this, as opposed to getting off in left field, which often happens in these meetings when we're deliberating with legislators and other stakeholders. Mayor Bierman, your city would be one of the most negatively impacted communities in the state if there was a change to the 50-50 formula. And I want to just make sure the whole board understands why. So I'll say it for you. Park City has approximately 8,500 full-time residents, correct? And yet your daytime population, peak season is what?
Well, our annual service population is over 40,000, and our peaks are anywhere between 80 to 100,000.
Perfect. So part of why there's a point of sale component in the sales tax formula is to recognize that for a community like Park City, you have 5 times the number of residents in that city at any given time. And during peak season, 10 times the number of, if not more, full-time residents in Park City at any time. So every time they shop at a restaurant or shop at a store or eat at a restaurant, they're contributing to the larger than otherwise necessary police department that Park City is equipped with, That's one of the unique challenges that resort communities face, like Park City. I mentioned that Wayne and Roger have been working on our sales tax analysis to figure out how point of sale has shifted over the course of the last couple of years since the Wayfair decision authorizing the collection of all online sales. And so that's not ready for prime time yet, but that'll be an important data point as we go along. So, and Mayor Bierman, in the board packet, you'll see we outlined the PRC's recommendation of changing the sales tax formula along with our relevant policy platform. That's not up on the screen now, but we're switching to it. We're, unless told otherwise, we'll proceed based on our existing policy platform on sales tax, which doesn't flat out say no changes ever to 50/50. It instead says any changes to 50/50 needs to go through this type of collaborative process and check all of these boxes. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. So this is our existing sales tax resolution. And if a board member or the board wants to make any changes, that happens at the convention in September, but we're trying to honor our existing platform in light of what's coming at us. But Park City and Moab and other resort communities would see the brunt of changes. But also, if your city's a destination city, you would see major impacts with any changes. So Salt Lake City, and Orem City, Layton City, and the like. One thing, Councilmember Allen, to your point, I was thinking about is I'm going to put some words in Mayor Caldwell's mouth since he's on family vacation. I know that he's been frustrated in Weber County, feeling like Ogden has been proactively pursuing some strategies around housing and not feeling like other cities are necessarily pulling their weight, even if they're unique communities compared to Ogden. And so that's the tug of war we find ourselves in as league staff, is recognizing that Ogden and the communities outside of Ogden are unique and different, but everyone has a role to play in trying to accommodate this growth and preserve the quality of life that we all cherish.
Yeah, I can see that, Cameron. I can appreciate that. I wonder if, as those discussions are made, that not necessarily, maybe not all cities are created equal in that sense. I don't think, like, even in our city, we recognize we need affordable housing. I mean, I hear it constantly from people looking for houses, but at the same time, we cannot, provide the same kind of housing as a city that is already set up for that, if that makes sense. So that's just all I'm encouraging, but thank you, that makes sense.
Can we flip back then to the grid?
So I guess in terms of moving this forward, any other suggestions or changes to this? Are we ready to adopt it with the changes, or at least recommend it? We're going to see some changes. I think there'll be something inserted more about one size doesn't fit all, the high priorities, but. Mayor Bierman, is that a motion you're going to make?
Yes, I wasn't sure if you needed a motion or just a thumbs up, but I would make a motion that we approve these priorities with that one amendment as suggested by Gary.
Since I agree with you, Andy, I'll make that second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second on that. Any further discussion? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, you've got your direction.
Perfect. To Mayor Bierman's point, we did not want to spend much time reacting to the list that came from the Property Rights Coalition. We know that day is coming. We wanted to prioritize our list here. With respect to the lead policy platform that we organized within the work packet for you, were there any gaps in the growth space that anybody noticed or felt like where we should be clear about X or Y that anybody wants to bring up now?
Oh, is that shut tight?
Sounds like we got it.
Yep.
Okay, if there aren't any, obviously, if you think of something that's missing on reflection, I'm sure staff would like to hear from you.
Yeah, the one piece that we are silent on is anything related to homelessness. And in the August board meeting, we've invited, and he's accepted, former Senate President Wayne Niederhauser, who's now the Homelessness Services Director for the state of Utah, to come speak briefly with the league board. We've also reached out to the cities that provide currently the homeless resource centers. We're trying to figure out what, if anything, a policy resolution should say on homelessness, but would certainly welcome your input there, because that's a place that league staff has identified that we are silent in the policy space.
Okay, I think we still need to talk about water conservation.
We do. So Wayne, I'll turn it over to you and let you drive with your PowerPoint on the water piece.
Okay. Thanks, Cam. Try and make this relatively quick, but we are looking for guidance from the board on what requests, if any, we should make from the governor's office and his staff regarding the drought that we're currently in. So as you can see is the drought map up there. Majority of the state of Utah is in severe drought. You can see that we had, and obviously you're experiencing that in your communities. I was talking to a large conservancy district last week. One of their reservoirs that on average gets about 80,000 acre feet of runoff a year got 3,000 acre feet this year. And so it's obviously, we are in a severe drought and there are going to be impacts from that. On June 8th, the governor issued his third executive order. In that executive order, it called upon cities to implement a watering plans as well as supporting strategy to enforce it. So I read that to mean, you should have fines or something in which you can enforce this with your residents. It also calls upon municipal and industrial water suppliers to notify the water users of this drought, the impacts upon your system, and develop a response plan. It also calls upon residents to not water between certain hours, to only water 2 times in northern Utah and a maximum of 3 times a week in southern Utah. So obviously those were in the executive order. It's not something the governor has highlighted in his press conference. He talked on more about what the state is going to do on state facilities and with their water usage. But these were included in the executive order. What you see up here, last year in August 2020, we did a statewide survey with Y2 Analytics. We think it's very clear from the responses that we received that water conservation is a local government issue. But I do think there is a difference between long-term conservation efforts and a drought response. So asking someone to change their turf into a local scape, less water usage is a long-term conservation effort. Asking someone to take shorter showers and only water their lawn twice a week is a drought response that isn't something that we may ask them to do 2 years from now, depending on our snowpack. So what we're wondering from the board is, so option A is, do we ask the governor to come out with clear guidelines and requests for local governments? So saying, local governments, we want you to implement this twice a week or 3 times a week watering plan, and we expect you to associate that with your residents with a fine if they do not follow this guidance and enforce it. So the governor kind of make the political call, and we as local governments can point to saying, this is why we're doing it, is because the governor has asked for us to do that. And have him do that publicly. And we've even floated the idea of him coming to a town hall with local government leaders where he makes this request to you as well. Option B is we don't make that request. We just continue to push out resources from the league. Or option C is a combination of A and B or something else from the board. But that is what we're seeking from you today is, again, guidance on potentially what we should be asking the governor's office to do regarding the drought response.
This is Julie Fulmer. For me personally, I feel like option B is kind of where I would go with this. I think every city kind of knows their water and understands the needs of their communities. They understand we're in a drought. And I think with the resources that are being let down, at least from my perspective, we should be able to make those ordinance changes or request things from our residents and implement those types of fines if need be.
This is Carrie Malkovich. I kind of feel similar. Each town needs to come up with their own plan. We are a mountain community that has high fire danger, and we want our residents to hydrate enough to keep it the fire danger down, but not overdo it. In addition, we don't have resources as a small city to adequately enforce something that's mandatory. We need to come up with something that we can realistically do. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't be able to enforce.
And I can say, I certainly don't want to do anything that convinces the governor to recommend or require that local jurisdictions impose fines. I mean, I think we have to approach this on an honor system basis. Certainly the education needs to be beefed up, but I just envision, I mean, I'm sure that many of us are already getting requests from people tattling on the school, the city, the neighbor for wasting water, and to have a fine thing like that, I think is just going to be more of that I don't really have an appetite for. The one thing that I have a concern about, and I know some of you, a lot of us have wildland urban interface areas, and you know, we've already got fireworks restrictions in those areas, right? But I am really concerned about given the dryness of the fuels, what that's going to look like, and whether, because those things are also almost impossible to enforce. I think it has to be something that the governor would do to encourage people to maybe give it a rest this year or something like that because of the fire danger. But I wouldn't have I don't think under state law there's much more that we can do in terms of restricted areas. We've already done that, but at least an admonition or some kind of support for conservation of water and be sane about fireworks.
Mayor Silvestrini, this is Clint Smith. I really appreciate you bringing up that last point. I will just echo in terms of the options in front of us on the drought response. I agree with those comments that have made with option B, and really leaving that to the the local entity to try and put those proper restrictions in place. But to your last point of the fireworks restrictions, and the fact that, at the local community level, we don't have that authority to put those full bans and restrictions in place. We can only limit those areas where we've had, history of, we're dealing with an exceptional year and exceptional circumstances in terms of the dryness heading into a holiday season where we see that they've been able to ban the fireworks on all state lands and unincorporated lands, which really all that does is, if there wasn't in those areas, it pushes them into our communities where we do have those areas that we are unable to restrict, which could really just completely exacerbate that problem. So in terms of, if I was, as a board member, if I was just suggest that we put or ask of some clarification or at least some help from the governor's office, mine would be in the form of allowing the local entities to make those determinations on fireworks this year on their own. And that will, I think, in a lot of ways really help with the water restrictions that we need to be aware of.
Yeah. So council member / chief / maybe future Mayor Smith, that's a lot of titles, but you get the point. Under the current statutory framework around fireworks and the definition of hazardous environmental conditions, do you think there is an opportunity this year to classify areas that maybe don't have a history of burning, but right now are excessively dry, has hazardous environmental conditions, and therefore ban fireworks there? Or do you think that even that language in current law doesn't go far enough?
That's a really good question, Cam. I think that there are other areas certainly that, or even if we expand the areas that push us up against what are our known urban interface areas, or just our areas of concern that we've, each of our entities have historically put under restrictions each year. But again, I think the view this year has to be that if you look at what our precipitation levels have been, and the fact that really our fire season, all you have to do is look around the state and see what's going on right now. Our fire season arrived about 4 to 6 weeks earlier than normal this year. And again, if you look at the temperatures forecast for this week, the fuel level that we did have, the moisture level in the fuels that we had will be basically completely depleted almost by the end of this week, just based on the temperatures that we're on pace to have the hottest day ever on record and recorded in June tomorrow. If those predictions hold true, we have no moisture in sight coming to give us any relief. And even if it does, it will be so temporary. It's not going to saturate those fuels in any manner. I think that, again, the governor has already let out to demonstrate what that risk is this year with the restrictions that they've put in place. But they, again, in my mind, they've really kind of handicapped the communities where they took that authority away from us. Just another note, last week we had 1 day of 7% humidity that was recorded here. We only hit that once the entire fire season last year, and that was in late August. And again, that was in early June this year. So again, we're in a situation that I don't think that many of us have ever really realized or seen a space before when it comes to the drought conditions and what that means for potential as we head into July, and in particular the holidays where we celebrate.
Well, and I thank you, Clint. I mean, our fire chief comes from Oregon, and they had that conflagration basically up there last year, and he has a concern that could happen in the Salt Lake Valley if there were down canyon winds that would, in a red flag day that would fuel that kind of a fire. It could actually be like a Chicago fire situation that sweeps across the valley in some way. So I think that actually, you want to ask something of the governor. I don't know what actually could be done under current law given the restrictions that we have, but some help from the governor's office in terms of, and I don't know that it's a ban, but it's at least because you can't enforce stuff anyway. That's the other, issue here. It's impossible to do, but some kind of strong admonition about being careful with them and/or foregoing them this year. It'd be a good year to take a break and go see a commercial display or something like that.
So, Mayor Silvestrini, the current law that was amended in 2018, based in large part of the resolution that league members passed, refers to the hazardous environmental conditions as saying the fire code official determines that existing or historical hazardous environmental conditions necessitate controlled use of any ignition source. The legislative body may prohibit in mountainous, brush covered, forest covered, or dry grass covered area within 200 feet of a variety of environmental places, the WUI, or a limited area outside that hazardous area to facilitate the readily identifiable closed area. So what I'm trying to figure out is what exactly we should ask the governor for. And Councilmember Smith, Chief Smith, maybe we just need to have a quick conversation with you and your colleagues on the fire official side to figure out, do the existing hazardous environmental conditions, because how much flexibility is there in here, and is it the governor? I'm just not sure what the governor said.
Yeah, so the first part of the statute you read, would give us more authority, but the second half actually, and the way a lot of us interpret that is, if you don't have a lot of dry brush, grass, it really, you almost get into where you need to be close to some kind of urban interface, or at least have a huge amount of vegetation in the area to be able to restrict them. Personally, I don't think, I have had a lot of people say the governor should ban them, okay? I don't know how effective that's going to be. And I don't think it's effective even if we were going to ban them, even as a municipality, how that would work. I just think I think we should have the governor say something about, since he's banned them on state land, just encourage people to not do them. I don't know if maybe I'm being a Pollyanna about that, but I think a lot of people do recognize how hot and dry it is, and that maybe they'll exercise some restraint.
Can I make a comment too? This is Julie Fulmer. From what I was understanding, one of the issues that we face as a community too is that when those areas do get banned, we no longer get to have oversight as a community, and the neighborhoods in our areas start shooting them off in their residential areas, and it becomes a much more unsafe situation as we don't have control over putting anything out that might be occurring. So allowing us to have an oversight pattern that says, okay, in this area, we're able to put it in this specific location. We have to get the permit. We facilitated it, and we know how to put it out. It allows the communities to come together rather than try to facilitate those things outside of it. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think that allowing cities to do that would be helpful for my community.
Cam, and this is Clint again. I'll just add that as, again, wearing my other hat as fire chiefs, at least in the Salt Lake Valley, we did start a conversation last week, right at the very end of the week, and we're hoping to really kind of continue that this week to where we as that group come together and really call a press conference to just really stand together and talk about, as Mayor Silvestrini just mentioned, really just highlighting the concerns that we have this year. And because I think that the realisticness of an all-out ban is just not there. So I think we have to do our best to highlight the concerns that we have, call attention to them, and ask people really to really be diligent this year. Again, we don't want to take away the opportunity for people to gather and to celebrate. We just really want to educate people and have them be completely aware of that. And so if we are able to get that pulled together, I will make sure that that's at least communicated, obviously, with the league, and each of the entities will be aware, as we can really help each other to push that message out.
I agree, Clint. Thank you. And good luck with the Chiefs. I know I talked to Brad Larson about this, and I hope he's been in touch with you guys. So
yeah, definitely. We're working closely with the Fire Marshals Association from the state as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's been good feedback, and I know we're short on time, so.
Okay, is that everything?
I have just a couple quick takeaways. So here are the final takeaways from today. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Number one, we need you over the next few weeks to interact with your legislators. We are happy to facilitate meetings and join you anywhere in the state to facilitate those conversations. When we have our new staff hired, that'll be a primary responsibility of that new staff, is to connect and implement that city's work effort. We have that toolkit on our website. We've highlighted in Friday Facts of how to facilitate those conversations between you and your legislators so that they understand the full story around land use and growth and how your city is funded and what makes your community unique. Second, we will bring a recommendation back to you about Metro Townships for later this summer. The next board meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 16th. You'll notice we've listed 9 or noon. When we historically would hold LPC and board meetings on the same day, we would usually hold the board meeting in the morning and LPC at lunch. So I will finalize that with Mayor Caldwell when he returns later this week. The league officers will be meeting on Friday with the governor's office. That's our kitchen cabinet meeting that happens weekly during the session, will be happening monthly, starting this month through December. We will bring up we'll bring up fireworks with them and also talk about this alignment issue on economic development, tax policy, growth, and the like. And we'll get our Officers Plus group up and going once the membership of those other subgroups is determined. August 1st is the resolutions deadline, so if you saw any gaps you think need to be filled within the league policy platform, please let us know and we can work through that process. If there are no resolutions, that's fine too. September 1st will be the board member application date. So if your term is expiring, we'll let you know before the August board meeting. You can decide whether you wish to apply again. We'll be opening that up later this summer. So it says TBD, but it will actually be September 1st now. And then we'll finalize the September board meeting, whether we need to do it early in the month or wait until the annual convention. So a lot of moving parts, but thank you very much to everybody for your time, your insight, and your leadership. Never a dull moment in local government in Utah right now. So thank you for your support. And most importantly, thank you for passing the budget. And we appreciate your support of the organization.
Thank you, everybody. Who wants to make Mayor Caldwell's favorite motion?
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep. Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody. Have a good summer. Stay safe and don't use any fireworks.
Thank you.
I will relay to Mayor Caldwell that we started 3 minutes late and ended 4 minutes late, which means we went over by 1 minute, which is